Hey everybody, I'm Ben Hoffman and welcome back to Hoffman Reproductions. We appreciate you tuning in once again. On this episode, we're going to be discussing how to make a axe sheath or cover. You can use this design for tomahawk, hatchet, belt axe, even a felling size axe. Special emphasis on the 18th century, but you can use it for a modern axe if you wish. So I'm going to take you through the construction techniques. So regardless of what we see in motion picture, where the hero is tearing through the woods with his tomahawk not covered or sheathed in any particular fashion, generally speaking, edged weapons, tools would have a sheath on them in the 1700s. Back then they knew too that was a pretty dangerous thing to partake of. You could easily cut yourself, fall on it, inflict more injury on yourself than the enemy. So typically sheaths were used. We don't know a whole lot about them, exactly how they were made or what construction techniques were utilized, other than they are mentioned. And as things go, my family and I recently took a trip to Pennsylvania. We stopped at Fort Ligonier, and there, whilst going through the museum, they had a description of some of the grenadier troops in 1758 when they were on their way to that area. Had an equipment list, and one of the things that they had listed there was each soldier carried a tomahawk and a cover, or as we would say, a sheath, to protect the cutting edge of that and or the user. So the fact that there aren't any originals, just the cover, that have survived today. There's some full covers with a shoulder carriage that have from that time period, but just the cover that covers the blade, we don't know what those look like. None survived to today. So when that happens, we have a little bit of creative freedom when reproducing those. Now, when there's nothing to go on other than a basic description, it just says cover or sheath and period text, you want to stick with things that they had in use. So we're going to use oak tan leather. We're going to use materials mostly that they had available then, and construction techniques to hopefully replicate something that could and would have been used in the time period. So stay tuned and we'll show you how that was done here next. Okay, so we are now set up in the shop, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the basic tools that I use to construct these. This is not going to be a leather sewing tutorial. I'm assuming you have basic leatherworking skills. I'm just going to show you the tools that I use to manufacture one of these. So we've got some heavy cardstock to manufacture our pattern. Got a piece of 5/6 ounce vegetable tan leather. I find that weight is just about ideal. You can use thinner or thicker leather, but I find that weight thickness works the best for this. Hole punch. You can substitute a drill bit to make a hole if you don't have one of these. Small pair of pliers for pulling our needles through. We have some 6-ply beeswax linen thread, couple of harness needles, a diamond eye sewing awl, round eye sewing awl, set of dividers here, another set of dividers that I use for putting on a little bit of decoration, a small needle file, a set of leather shears, also a leather trimming knife, and then we have our little screw ball stud for the leather that I'll show you more on here in a minute. But very first thing we're going to do is construct our pattern. That's up next. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is take our cardstock. You're going to fold it in half and then pull the paper at a slight angle. See that straight? We'll pull it at a slight angle like this, about halfway up, and then just crease it. Next thing you're going to do, you're going to take the axe that you want to use and put that just about even with the bottom edge of the fold, maybe just a little bit proud. That is the paper overhanging the axe back here because the axe is thicker. Bear with me, I'm trying to do this while staying in the frame here. Then where our cutting edge is, go ahead and trace that, and then trace the top edge of the axe as far back as you want to go. I like to get it in the back third here. Make a little mark on the bottom. Set the axe aside for a second. Make a little connecting mark here. And then take your scissors And on this line, stay on the line, cut through both thicknesses of the paper, but then stop right where that line ends, okay? We don't want to cut through this back section. So open it up and then cut along the outside edge only. Go ahead and trim that off. Get that out of the way, just cut that wide. And then what this is going to do, this is going to allow us to create a flap. Now if you want to, you can kind of trace the shape that you want on there for your flap. What I'm going to do is just more or less eyeball it. Just kind of go for a nice round look here. And then also this little back edge portion, I'm going to radius that a little bit. Just looks a little better when finished. Okay. So that's our basic pattern. Now before you commit and trace it on your leather, don't be afraid to take it, put it on your axe, and see how it fits. You might want to trim it a little bit or adjust it. Go ahead and shut the flap. See what that looks like. If you're happy with it, continue going, but if it looks like you need to change it, cut it, enlarge it, whatever you want to do to get a nice fit, go ahead and redo it. Even if it means recutting your pattern, get it right now, because paper is cheap, leather is not. So I'm going to trim this up just a little bit, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so I've got our pattern trimmed up to where it fits nice. Again, take your time. If you don't like the way it is, don't be afraid to redo it, but I've got our pattern all ready to go here now. So I'm going to take, and on the smooth side of the leather, go ahead and lay it down on there. Make sure it fits. Won't have any problem. Again, this is basic leather working, but now I'm going to take a round awl and just simply trace around it so I have a nice cut line. Do that, trace the whole way around it, and we're ready to cut it out. Alright, so I got this cut out off camera, nothing really to show. It's just simply taking our leather shears and cutting out on the line. Right here where the sharp corner is, usually I'll cut up to about a 1/2 inch both directions and then take a leather trimming knife. You can use a pocket knife if you want to, and finish that cut. It's just a little hard to do with shears. So got that all done. Also cut out a welt. This is going to be to protect our stitching. We'll show this in a minute. It's going to get sewn in where the leather folds in on itself right here along where the cutting edge will rest. Also the edge, you probably can't tell on camera, I ran a edge beveler on this. You don't have to do that. It's this little tool right here just bevels the edge of the leather. It makes for a little nicer fit and finish on the leather when you're done. Again, you don't have to do it, but I did do that just to tell you everything that's going on here. So we're going to go ahead and lay out the holes to sew this together. That's up next. So what I do now is I just more or less hold the leather where it's going to go when this is sewn shut, and then I'll take my awl, and coming off of the edge in both directions about 1/8 of an inch, I'll just make a little hole, and now I'll pinch the leather together about where it goes. This is so I know where to start laying out my holes. Make sure that's flush right at the tip, and then just push through both layers there, and now I have a starting point to lay out my holes. So I'm going to talk about the screw stud real quick. I do believe you could get riveted versions of this, which would be a little more authentic. They're just simply a ball-headed stud we're going to use for the closure. They have a base and they screw together. I'll show you how it works. This particular version is a Phillips head, which obviously in the 18th century they did not have that. I think you can get them in a flathead version. Amazon sells these, Weaver Leather, Tandy Leather, all those places. I'll show you a way that you can finish this off to make it a little more authentic so you can't tell that's a Phillips. But in order to lay that out, you're going to take your piece of leather. I do this before I sew it together. You can see that's the front. So eyeball the approximate center. You can measure it if you want to, but I just eyeball it. And then you're going to drop down about 1/2 inch, and then go ahead and just make yourself a little hole. Now you have that located. Then you're going to take, if you have a punch, if you don't have a punch, like I said, you can use a drill bit. And then using the smallest cutter head on there, I believe that's number 6. Just punch straight through till you get your hole made. See, we have a nice hole. And then the back of the stud, the screw portion, goes on the back side of the leather, pushes through, and then you just screw it in. And then you snug it up with a screwdriver, and that's how you attach it. Okay, so with this attached now, to finish it off and hide this Phillips head finish portion there, because obviously that's not authentic, you don't have to do this, because once this is sewn, it's going to be really hard to see it anyway, but just to give it a little extra touch, I'll take a power drill, and then I'm just going to cam the head out on this thing so it just looks more like a hand-pounded rivet. So there, the head got turned out on that. Now it doesn't look like a Phillips head screw at all. It can leave a little burr, so if you get that, just take a small file, get that polished off, and then we're ready to keep sewing. Don't lay the head portion punched through on the flap yet. We don't do that till this thing is completely sewn and we can fit it on the axe. So we're going to lay the stitch line out and get this thing stitched up next. So I have our wing nut divider to lay out our stitch line adjusted to about 1/8 of an inch. So close to the bottom but not quite all the way down is where I'll start, and then just bring it up to the hole and do the same thing over here. And that will give us our line to lay our stitches down on. Take that one a little further. You don't have to take it all the way to the bottom. We can lay it out a little further if necessary. The welt portion, just in case you're not familiar with it, you can cut this out of slightly thicker leather if you want to, but it's going to get sewn in place where our cutting edge will be, and that is what's going to protect our stitches from the cutting edge sliding into those stitches and cutting it. So I just made this out of a scrap piece. Obviously it's much longer than the sheath's going to be, but it's best to have a little too much. I just eyeball the approximate center of this, but to lay our stitch line out, you have to decide how far you want your stitch spacing to be. It's about 3/16, I would say. And to do this, you just start in the one hole. I push forward so that the bottom is hitting that. I'm going to tighten that up just a hair. And then on that line, you just lay your stitches out. This gives you a nice uniform stitch line rather than just arbitrarily punching holes in the leather. If you're going for a homespun kind of a look, you can do that, but 18th century stuff generally had a touch of craftsmanship to it most cases. And obviously you want to have the same number of holes going down one side as you do the other. I don't quite take it all the way to the bottom just in case we need to change our hole placement a hair. It's close to the bottom. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this piece of leather. Let's lay out our holes here. And now you're going to take your diamond-headed sewing awl, and since this isn't a long run of stitches, you don't typically want to pre-punch a bunch, but this is relatively few, so I typically will. And just keep it straight and push through to get an opening in both sides. I'll do the one side, then the other, and then the welt, and we'll be ready to sew together. Okay, again, I'm assuming you know how to sew leather, so I'm just going to kind of quickly show the basics here. I've got the leather folded in half, got our welt, put it through that first hole, and got our thread and needle set up, and I'm going to just use a harness maker's stitch on this, which gives the appearance of the thread all being in the same hole. Typically you'll need a set of pliers because the leather can get tight on the thread sometimes. On the first stitch, I'll typically double it up, go back and forth a couple times, but I'm just going to do that until we get them run all the way down. Okay, so as I am sewing my way down here now, I can estimate just how long that welt needs to be, and you can take something, a pencil or your awl, make a little mark, and then we'll just trim off that excess a little bit more, and then that will fit up in there as it should, and we can continue with our stitch line. Okay, so that's all sewn together now. Next I'm going to take my trimming knife and any of that welt that's sticking off above the leading edge there, I'm just going to trim that back. And I'll take a belt sander, but you can use a wood brasp too, and go over that and flush that up really nice. And then once I finish with that, I'll run an edge beveler down this edge right here and just clean that up real nice. And then I'll be ready to show you how to make the corresponding hole in our flap. That's next. Okay, so with our stitching all the way done, this trimmed off and beveled, looks pretty good. I forgot to show off camera here, but I've put a couple of stitches through the front and around. That just helps reinforce that piece a little bit. But with this being done, now we'll go ahead and make the corresponding hole in the flap. And the way that I do that is to take the axe, put it in the sheath, nice and snug where you want it to go. It's not flopping around. And carefully and as straight as you possibly can, make it nice and tight, fold it over, and then take and press down very firmly on that ball, that stud, and it'll leave an imprint on the back side of the leather. Remove the axe. You can see now we have a spot where we know to punch. I then take my hole punch, and with the second to the largest punch on there, it's number 2 on mine. You don't want to make it a perfect fit to that, or it'll be too loose. Put it on that mark and punch straight through. Now it won't quite work as it should like that. You need a little give in the leather so this essentially snaps in place. So what I do, lay it down, take a sharp knife, and on the top part of it, don't put it on the bottom, put it on the top, I'm going to cut through the leather about 1/4 of an inch or so up. And that's going to give it the necessary play so it'll snap in place and stay shut. There's a little cut. You can clean it up a little bit if you want to, go through it from both sides. So now we've got our cut. So the leather will give just a little bit. Put it in and see how she fits. Fits pretty good. Well, that's nice and secure. Easy to get on and off. Obviously, that's not coming off. One advantage of this style is it's cinched narrow here, so if it gets pulled that way, the tighter it gets. Sometimes if I want to, and I may on this one, if it's sticking out a little bit, I'll trim that off straight. It's up to you on that. But that is essentially done. And now we can treat the leather as we see fit. We can oil it and wax it. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and dye it. I'll show you that next. Okay, so finally we're going to add a little color to this. You can color leather just, any which way you see fit. Here, for the sake of speed, I'm going to use this commercial leather dye, dark brown. Just load up the dauber and paint it on there. I'll usually do 2 coats of this, let the one coat dry for a while, hit it again, and then follow it up with several good coats of neat's foot oil and my homemade wax that I make and use. And then in between that, I'll show you how to add just a little bit of decoration to this within the taste and scheme of the 18th century. And I'll continue on with this until I got this all colored. I'll show it to you the next step in a minute. Okay, so this sheath is dyed now. I have not oiled it or waxed it or anything or finished our edge. I'll show you how to do that last. But with my wing nut dividers here, these are the smooth shank ones. I've got them laid out to about 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to put a little decorative border on this. Nothing gaudy. 18th century leather designs tend to be rather simple rather than elaborate, so just something small to dress this up a little bit. So I'm going to lay it down here on the edge of the bench, start at the edge, and just work my way around. All right, everybody, so here is the finished product. You can see came out real nice. That's the tooling line. I'm not sure if you can see that or not that we put on there. I've put several coats of neat foot oil on this sheath, as well as a wax top coat. It's very sturdy, not coming off at all, protects the edge very well. Just a quick uncover and that pops off. This doesn't utilize any type of leather ties. Of course, there's no modern snaps on it. We used our ball stud on there. But again, this can be used for any type of axe, be it historic, modern, small belt axe, tomahawk, felling size axe. These work great and is probably a pretty fair representation of what would have been used originally. So hopefully you found this video entertaining and informative. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate that. That helps us an awful lot, and we'll see you all next time.